Welcome to worship. I invite everyone to wave at everyone else. It is so good to see familiar faces and new faces. We are glad that this can be a place of solace and hope for people from near and far. My name is Haley, and I'm honored to serve as lay worship leader this morning, along with our tech people, Margaret and Julia, who are working behind the scenes for us. Christine is our coordinator for Joys and Sorrows, and I'll ask her to put the link in the chat box now if you'd like to submit one. It may already be in there. Our sermon this morning is from Reverend Alex McGee, our assistant minister. I will now read you the words of welcome that we so love. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you express your identity, whatever your situation in life, whatever your experience of the holy, as you come seeking love, your presence here is a gift. Whether you are filled with sadness, overflowing with joy, needing to be alone with yourself, or eager to engage with others, all who welcome all are welcome here. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. So as I now light my chalice at home, I invite you also to light yours. Here we are. For our opening, I would like to read you an excerpt from a book I have been pondering as I have gone through and continue to go through a period of change. There was another reading from this author, Adrienne Marie Brown, a few months ago. Her writing considers the constant state of change in our world and invites us to learn from the patterns around us. She reminds me to think about fractals and the relationship between small and large when the large threatens to overwhelm me. For example, transform yourself to transform the world. Here is an excerpt from her book, Emergent Strategies, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds. All right. This is the invitation to practice the world we wish to see in the current landscape. Yes, resist the onslaught of oppression, but measure our success not just by what we stop, but by how many of us feel and can say, I am living a life I don't regret, a life that will resonate with my ancestors and with as many generations forward as I can imagine. I am attending to the crises of my time with my best self. I am of communities that are doing our collective best to honor our ancestors and all humans to come.
Thank you so much, Haley, for that reading. Haley, as I heard you read that yesterday in rehearsal and just now, one line really jumped out at me, and I want to lift up to everyone that particular line. Attending to the crises of my time with my best self. I'll say that again. Attending to the crises of my time with my best self. That is what that author is introducing us to do. And goodness gracious, everyone, isn't it true that we have a lot of crises right now? And to name a few, ongoing police violence, police interference in peaceful protests, loss of medical rights for transgender people, ongoing marginalization of Indigenous people, ongoing loss of policies that protect the environment, and then this pandemic that is taking lives, stressing medical systems, and adding extra layers of stress for those who are already socially isolated. Along with that, a new layer of crisis is well-intentioned people trying to help, but with limited understanding and therefore reharming people. And let me give a little corrective to what I just said. It is not a new crisis that well-intentioned people try to help, but with limited understanding and accidentally reharm people. That is just becoming more visible to more people. Each of you who joined together in this Zoom worship this morning has a different perspective on what is happening. You may have more or different crises on your list. Each of you has unique pains and griefs, unique angers and fears. And so the question arises as we hear this author's invitation to attend to the crises of our time with our best selves. What gets in the way of being our best self? As I've reflected on that this week, and actually over the last month, I'd like to lift up three things today that I think either can get in the way or can be a motivator. Anger, privilege, or awareness of privilege, and grief. Each of those can get in the way of us being our best selves or can be a motivator for us to be our best selves. One of the primary emotions circling these days is anger. Anger in its pure form is a fire that tells us something is violating our values or safety. But when expressed in harmful ways, anger can damage others and ourselves. Therefore, as we proceed on a spiritual journey, we have an opportunity to observe the anger and not let it eat us up. In particular, the spiritual path of Buddhism seeks to help people develop enough self-awareness to have a saving pause before acting. Therefore, this saving pause helps a person respond instead of reacting in negative ways. So I'd like to share a reading from the Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh from Vietnam. So the book is called Teachings on Love. It was published about 10 years ago, and I'm reading from page 37 and 38. And he's in a part in the book, in the chapter where he's talking about the culmination of a certain meditation practice. He says, finally, meditate on someone you consider to be your enemy, someone whom just thinking about makes you angry. Put yourself in his place and give rise to the thought, may he be peaceful, happy, and light in body and spirit. And then Thich Nhat Hanh says, if you are not yet able to love yourself, you will not be able to love your enemy. But when you are able to love yourself, you can love anyone. He says, when you do this, you will see that your so-called enemy is not more or less a human being who is suffering. Again, the meditation instructive is to cultivate the thought, may he be safe and free from injury. During the Vietnam War, I meditated on the Vietnamese soldiers, praying they would not be killed in battle. But I also meditated on the American soldiers and felt a very deep sympathy for them. I knew that they had been sent far away from home to kill or be killed, and I prayed for their safety. That led to a deep aspiration that the war would end and allow all Vietnamese and Americans to live in peace. Once that aspiration was clear, there was only one path to take: to work for the end of the war. When you practice love meditation, you have to take that path. As soon as you see that the person you call your enemy is also suffering, you will be ready to love and accept him. The idea of enemy vanishes and is replaced by the reality of someone who is suffering and needs our love and compassion. So that was from Teachings on Love by Thich Nhat Hanh. And this is one of these moments where I miss being in the sanctuary because I really want to see what's on your faces as you heard me read that, because I believe it can easily be misunderstood. Let us take a close look. Taken out of context, and I believe that teaching often is, this might look like a standalone spiritual practice. But note that I lifted it out of the middle of a book in which he's talking about gradually strengthening the muscles of self-compassion and then expanding it outward So he has a full-time commitment to being a monk. He meditates regularly. He's regularly changing his neurons and his physiology, and he is able to operate at that level. Notice he did not excuse the actions of the enemy. He did not disregard the harm done by the enemy. He is wise enough to see where a threat exists. And third, he doesn't just love his enemy and then be done. He moves to systemic change. And this is what I'm trying to lift up, is that a mature meditation practice leads to action, not just actions of pity or gifts, but action to stop the conditions that cause the suffering for everyone involved, including the person harming you. So, a breath before I transition from anger to awareness of privilege. So in addition to anger, one of the responses to these crises that I've been hearing recently is people discussing an increased awareness of privilege, their own privilege. So I'm going to define privilege as power that's given to a person due to the systems in which they live. And those systems can overlap, they can change over time. Some people can move in and out of those systems, and they can even change by geographic location. So for some people, realizing that you have privilege may feel like a burden, and that can lead to guilt. Guilt is a trap that can keep you immobilized. I see guilt as a train station where you shouldn't stay sitting in the waiting room with your bags and eating out of the vending machines. No, don't stay in the train station of guilt, but change trains and get on the train of action for the well-being of others. Because if you have privilege, then you have power within a system. That means you can do a lot of good. So instead of looking at your privilege and spending your time and energy lamenting it, free up that time and energy. Use your hands, your voice, to do the good that is needed for others to eat, for others to work, for others to enjoy their loved ones. Also, you can do good by changing the system that gives you power so that more power is shared with more people. So what would that mean right here in Central Virginia? Not everybody on this worship lives in Central Virginia, but many do. One way that I think is an effective way to consider sharing power is looking at who has access to housing and what zoning laws are currently being proposed, and who has the time to go speak to the policymakers, who has the time to go to meetings and examine the proposed policies and not even let them get to the spot where they're going to be voted on until they are really fair and just. Another way that a person with privilege might use it during this COVID pandemic is to look at what children who were counting on the city parks and rec programs this summer are going to be doing, and what are creative ways to help keep them safe and growing in appropriate ways. So those are just some ideas for the hopper, and I hope that you guys will share with your friends and neighbors and loved ones other ideas for what you might do. So another deep breath, shifting from anger and privilege to grief. What are the ways that it could be an obstacle, and what are the ways it could be a motivator? There's a poem by the poet David White. It is called The Well of Grief. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning down through the black water to the place we cannot see, will never know the source from which we drink. the secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness, glittering, round small coins thrown by those who wished for something else. I invite us to add a layer of spiritual practice and meditation right here in the middle of this sermon, right here in the middle of this Zoom service. So I'm going to invite you to a spiritual practice called Lectio Divina. Lectio Divina is based on the idea that there's many layers of wisdom in a passage, and we benefit from settling down into the layers. So I'm going to invite you to try that now. I'm going to read that poem again, and I invite you to use it as a spiritual practice, a listening and reflection spiritual practice. And to aid in that, because we're in this Zoom format where people may be looking at each other, depending on whether you're on gallery view or speaker view, to consider turning off your video. And what that would mean is you can still see what's going on in the Zoom worship, but other people don't see your face. They would see whatever name you have written in a little black box. So down for most people, if you click down at the bottom of your screen, there would be a way to turn off your video. And then whether you choose to do that or not, I invite you to settle your body into a position that feels meditative, beginning to ground your feet, if that helps, ground your pelvis and spine, feel your breath. And begin to open your ears all the way down to your heart. Listen again to this poem, this time for what gives you a holy disturbance. Listen for a word or phrase that nudges you to discomfort. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning down through the black water to the place we cannot see, will never know the source from which we drink, the secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness glittering round small coins thrown by those who wished for something else. This spiritual practice called Lectio Divina continues with a third and final stage, to listen with ears of nourishment this time. What nourishes you as you hear with the ears of your heart? Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning down through the black water to the place we cannot see, will never know the source from which we drink, the secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness glittering round small coins thrown by those who wished for something else. How can grief help you be your best self instead of being an obstacle to accessing your best self? And then on a whole other layer of what's going on right now, do you find the meditation and the reading, the poem, to be helpful? Or is there a different spiritual practice that you long for? Is it quiet time with family? Is it walking in the woods? Is it dance? As we go through these days, weeks, months of crisis, what are the spiritual practices that will help you to be nourished and motivated? Is it private or public? Is it disciplined or spontaneous? I'd like to share with you a reflection question based on the words of the Reverend Lauren Smith, a Black UU minister who wrote a letter last week to her fellow Black UUs everywhere. And we've been asked to share this so that Black UUs know they are not alone. Part of what she wrote says, "How is it with your spirit today? Today, my spirit is struck by grief. I trust in the possibility of change, and I know that there is a place for me in bringing about that change, but the grief is deep. Underneath grief and anger, there is a fierce love that is a saving grace. A fierce love that is a saving grace. Fierce love, love." My friends, right here, right now, is there something welling up in you that you know as a truth that helps you access that love? What gives you an inner keel, an even keel for the choppy waters ahead? Name it to yourself. And if you feel moved or able, feel free to write it in the chat box. Some of the things that I'm seeing in the chat box are that people find an inner keel walking with a friend, with their animals in their garden, reading, sitting quietly on the back deck, tending to vegetables in the greenhouse, watching children play, family, sitting in nature, gardening, walking, connection, reading the Washington Post, helping people vote, thinking in the wee hours of the night, activism, happy hour with family on Zoom, connection, having meaningful discussions with my family, examining the truth or knowing the truth that tragedy does not happen for a reason, but those who are connected by grief are connected in a more profound way. Watering my plants, the birds, playing music with friends, hummingbirds at the feeder, listening to nature around our home, prayer, yoga, and the prayer app on the phone. My friends, whether you wrote in the chat box or not, whether you could see it or not, I hope that everyone here found something inside their heart today that they know is true to them. It can be a spiritual practice or an inner keel as you go forward. The prayer, if you wish, can be embodied with arm movements to acknowledge what is above. And this may be one of those times that you would feel more prayerful if you stopped your video so other people weren't looking at you. That's your choice. If you want to stand or come to the front edge of your chair. But as you reach up, acknowledge the sun, the sky, the moon, the stars, the vastness beyond our understanding, and the way that we receive nourishment and wisdom when we listen to the wide universe. And down, if you wish, reaching down, maybe even touching the floor, which rests on the earth. This is a position of surrender. What is it that helps you let go? What is it you need to let go of in holy surrender and trust that the earth can absorb it, the earth that is bigger than we are? And a third step in this prayer, a third stage in this prayer, is to acknowledge community. And for you, that might mean reaching out your arms right now, stretching, acknowledging the gifts from neighbors and receiving from neighbors, the responsibility to tend and celebrate community. And the fourth part of this prayer is to honor inner wisdom. And for you, that might mean resting your hands on your heart, continue to breathe in awareness of these many dynamics together. And if you wish, move your arms, breathing in, reaching up. Breathing out, folding down. Breathing in, reaching out. And breathing out, hands to heart. Breathing in, arms up. Breathing out, surrendering down. Breathing in, arms outstretched to community. Breathing out, hands to your heart. 3 more times in silence. A few more breaths, finishing up your prayer time, your meditation time.
So listen now to the benediction. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering, and honor all persons. It is finished in beauty. Return often to let your cup be refilled. The chalice is extinguished, but the flame of hope, truth, and love goes with us.